Hello and welcome to this week's Geek TV. Joining me as always to celebrate and digest the latest happenings in the world of Doctor Who is Digital Spy's TV editor Morgan Jeffrey. Say hello, Morgan.
Hello.
Before we get on to this week's episode, The Caretaker, Morgan, let's just tackle a few questions and comments from you guys watching about last week's episode, Time Heist. To put it politely, a large amount of you disagreed with our judgment. To put it less politely, and how Danny C put it on YouTube, we pissed on everyone's strawberries. A phrase that I'm planning to use a lot more often in life.
It's going to catch on.
We don't want to be seen negative, Morgan, about the new series. Apparently people think we're too negative. So let's celebrate the new series so far. Are you enjoying Peter Capaldi as the Doctor so far?
Really enjoying Capaldi as the Doctor. Yeah, last week wasn't either of our tastes, I don't think, but I think we both agree that he's doing a terrific job in these episodes. I think what's great about him is there's been all this talk of him being a darker Doctor, and so he does thrive in episodes like Into the Dalek and Listen, but I think he's equally great at the lighter episodes, like, you know, the Robot of Sherwood or this week's one. I think he's great. And, you know, take for example Christopher Eccleston, who he got some criticism for. Yeah, he was great at the darker moments, the brooding moments. Maybe struggled a little bit with the Doctor's eccentricities and the lightness. Whereas I think Capaldi kind of nails it across the board.
So let's get on to this week's episode, The Caretaker. Is this another hit or is this another time heist?
I really enjoyed The Caretaker. Actually, I thought it was really good. The strongest thing in this series for me has been Peter Capaldi and Jenna Coleman and their whole relationship and their chemistry on screen. I think even in an episode like Time Heist, which I didn't enjoy so much, that always carried it through. And this is an episode that really capitalises on their relationship and their dynamic on screen. I
think the most impressive thing about the episode was the fact that even it had possibly one of the worst monsters or villains ever in the history of Doctor Who, as far as I've seen. You probably know a few worse, but
never forget the Bandrels. But yeah,
even though the monster was particularly bad this week, in my opinion, the fact that it didn't matter, it was completely irrelevant. The monster was essentially irrelevant. You know, it could have been a sock puppet, could have been a Bandrel, and it didn't matter because the rest of the episode was so good.
As you said, the monster was very secondary. It was in there because a Doctor Who episode has to have some kind of alien threat. But really, the core of this episode were the relationship between the Doctor and Clara, as I've said, but also Clara's ongoing kind of romance with Danny and how that's growing, and then the Doctor meeting Danny for the first time and those two butting heads. That was what was really at the heart of the episode, and that all worked wonderfully, I think.
And did you like Danny? Because so far, to be fair, I think secretly I've not been particularly that impressed. He's felt rather two-dimensional. But this week I found myself massively warming to him. Just the fact his response to the Doctor felt more like a natural response to the Doctor than you normally get in Doctor Who. Normally it's ridiculously open to the fact, oh, here's an alien guy and he's going to start taking you around and putting you in peril and danger.
Well, I'm not sure, personally, I agree that Danny's been two-dimensional, because maybe in his first episode, where he's in it very briefly and Into the Dalek, but in Listen, you do delve into his childhood a little bit. You understand some of his conflict. You know, very early on he's established as this soldier, but he's also sensitive. And that was a little bit heavy-handed in Into the Dalek. But then it kind of makes sense why he's sensitive and a maths teacher, but also a soldier, because the whole militaristic side of him has kind of been implanted, you know, as a child. So he's got this conflict and he's not really responsible for that. But I do agree that, you know, we get to know him even more this series, and I think Samuel Anderson really acquits himself very well.
Obviously, we can't have a discussion about this episode without mentioning the ending. I've been sort of constantly mentioning the fact that I was a bit disappointed Missy hasn't cropped up after the first two episodes. Missy was back this week.
Very briefly.
Mysterious Missy, just a casual look over the shoulder. Incredibly camp.
Even in silence, she's somehow camp.
And also the emergence of Chris Addison, which I don't think we knew he was going to come this week.
No, we knew he was going to be in the finale when we'd heard about his casting, but his appearance in this episode was a surprise.
And he's playing a character called Seb. Did you think this adds anything to any of the arguments about who Missy is?
I'm still remaining convinced that she is an original character and not the Rani, or the Valiard, or the Master. But the question is, you know, who is the gatekeeper of the Nether Sphere? If she is an original character, who is that? What is the Nether Sphere? What is the Promised Land? A theory I've got, actually, is that you remember when River Song died in her first ever appearance, and David Tennant's Doctor saves her by kind of downloading her consciousness into this computer. And I think maybe possibly, I don't think it's that same computer, but I think maybe Stephen Moffat might be revisiting that kind of idea, where people are snatched up at the immediate moment after death, and their consciousness is somehow saved in some kind of, sci-fi nonsensical way and stored into a computer. I think that maybe is what this promised land really is.
So are you excited about Chris Addison? And do you think he's going to have a bigger role to play, or do you think he's just going to be a little cameo purely so we can have a sort of Capaldi head-to-head with him?
Oh yeah, because we haven't had enough thick of it mashups on with Doctor Who on YouTube. No, I am looking forward to him. He's a great actor, actually. I think people might know him best maybe as more of a stand-up comic, but he, as you say, he's great in the thick of it with Capaldi, and I'm really looking forward to that reunion. He's acted in Skins and that kind of thing, got quite good reviews for that sort of thing. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him and what he brings to the show.
Before we go, I've also got questions from you guys from YouTube and in the comments section on the site. Jaden Mayhew writes, Morgan, what is your take on Peter Capaldi as a Doctor? I think we've discussed this already, but do you prefer him over previous Doctors, Matt and David, or are you still warming to him?
For me, of those three, Matt Smith is still my favourite. I did really love David Tennant at the time, and I think maybe even because I didn't want to accept Matt Smith and he kind of won me over, I think he's really great. He's for me the perfect combination of kind of new Doctor where he's a bit dashing and a bit romantic, and the old school Doctor where he's silly and eccentric and sometimes quite dark. But I do really like Peter Capaldi. I think as I say, I think he's doing an absolutely great job. And I still do love David Tennant, but for me, you've got to go a long way to beat Matt. But I am really enjoying Capaldi so far.
Yeah, I think I'm of the controversial opinion that Tennant is my least favourite of all the new Doctors.
He was voted Digital Spy's most favourite Doctor of all time.
And he basically wins at every poll.
Yeah.
But I understand his popularity.
Yeah.
Maybe I just need to rewatch his episodes or something, but yeah, Smith is currently top, but after this week's episode, and I genuinely mean this week's episode, The Caretaker, I think as long as Capaldi doesn't end up leaving after maybe 2 series, I think Capaldi will be my favourite. I think this week showed what the potential he's got, given the best scripts, given the best storylines, and I think he showed the fact that he can just mix up the comedy and the darkness and
the
drama
emotion and the romance. Yeah, he can handle it all. That's what I think is so great about Capaldi.
There were a couple of looks this week to the camera where he genuinely managed to convey an awful lot in in a single look.
What I like about his Doctor as well is that they've kind of, because they've eliminated the romance element with the Doctor and the companion because of the age difference, they've had to find another way of playing that dynamic. And so when the Doctor meets Danny, it's not jealousy in a kind of rival lovers way. It was almost like Clara introducing her boyfriend to her dad or something like that. He does say it's your dad from space. It is kind of like this awkward meeting of the father and the potential boyfriend, and I really enjoyed that dynamic. I thought Capaldi played that kind of mixture of kind of who is this guy, but also kind of he's proud of her going off with this, forging a new life. I thought he played that incredibly well.
Another question from Wisfit111. Good name, strong. I think we've covered the fact that you don't think Missy is the Rani, but he kind of just says, seeing as the Rani has had no mention in New Who, do you think maybe her time is coming? Do you think she could come back at all?
Well, I mean, again, we discussed this previously. The thing with the Rani is not, she's well remembered, and Kate O'Mara is brilliant, but the character, I don't think personally merits revisiting. She was great at the time, very much a product of the time. I think unless you radically reinvent the Rani wouldn't really work in the modern series of Doctor Who. And if you're going to radically reinvent something, why bother bringing it back in the first place? That was kind of my problem with John Sims' Master, where they were like, oh, the Master was a moustache-twirling villain. So we have to reinvent him to make him work, and now he's this absolutely crazy, cartoony, zany villain. And it's like, well, if you're going to change the character that much, it's not the same character, so why not just introduce a new villain? That's my feeling. If you'd have to change the Rani so much to make her work now that it's not worth doing at all.
Morgan Jeffries just killed off the Rani there in one sweeping
the Rani movement. Dismissed. I loved the Rani at the time, I just don't feel she fits into contemporary Doctor Who.
Well, then one final comment from someone calling themselves Man Love, who says, I want to have Morgan Jeffries babies, that is all. And I think that's a perfect way to end this week's episode. We'll see what we can do, Man Love. But please join us again next week for more Geek TV. Sorry, I can't help but laugh at that comment. We'll be back here in 7 days' time.
We're going to have to do the outro again. You twat.